friends, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Katie, and today I want to talk about my 2022 goals, specifically around tarot, books and reading, and YouTube as well. Obviously, I think like most people, I am someone who has ideas in my head of things that I would like to do, I would like to achieve, and sometimes I do achieve them and sometimes I don't. But as for sort of more like the New Year resolutions, the intentions for the year, sitting down and I don't know, like assessing where you're at and where you want to go in the coming year, I do have some mixed feelings about goals in general. And that is obviously goals that are measurable and specific. They're the sort of goals that we're told to make. And I do appreciate those kinds of goals. However, they can be quite tricky for me, as I'm sure they are for many people. And I think in particular, they're tricky for me for two main reasons. The first is that I'm a recovering perfectionist. Perfectionism has been like a really big problem in my life ever since I can remember. Because perfectionism isn't just about striving for like good outcomes. It's about setting the bar so high that it's literally unattainable, and then measuring not just whether you achieve something based on that ridiculous goal, but literally measuring your self-worth against that unattainable idea. Perfectionism is really damaging, and it has been really damaging to me in the past. And so I'm very conscious and careful about the sort of goals I set for myself and not trying to set myself up for failure. The second thing that makes goal setting a little bit tricky for me is the fact that I have a chronic illness, a chronic disability. There are times where my capacity is just lower. It's just a fact, where I don't have as many spoons as I wish I had. So in large part for those two reasons, goal setting is tricky for me. It really is. And on top of that, it makes goal sharing, like sharing my goals online, it's a pretty vulnerable situation to be in, because even though I've tried my best to take those two things into account when I've set these goals, I need to be careful of not like having some value judgment on myself as a human being if my chronic illness and my disability means that I can't do the things that I really would like to do. On top of that, of course, like every human being, I'm fickle and I change my mind. So as the year goes on, these goals may also just feel less relevant to me as a human. But there are some things that I've just sort of written down that I wanted to focus on in 2022, and they are relevant to the stuff that I share online. They're relevant to a lot of the topics that I talk about, specifically books and tarot, and they're also relevant to this channel. And I don't know, I wanted to share them this year, partly because I think that some of this might come up, not overly explicitly in my content, but I think it will be a bit of, like, it will influence the content that I make a little bit. And so I thought that would be just nice to, you know, have you in the loop in that process. Anyway, I think that's enough caveats and disclaimers and explanation. Let's just dive into some of the goals that I have set for myself for 2022. So let's start with books and reading, because I think this is the biggest section. This is the biggest area of my life where I want to get a whole lot more specific. And I suppose this is also where I'm not doing a depth here. I'm not. But I think I'm taking inspiration from the spirit of a depth here rather than the specifics, if that makes sense. And primarily my goal setting around books and reading this year comes from the desire to read more of the books that I already own and to acquire fewer books in the coming year. So I guess that is my main goal, my main focus, is to read more of the books that I already own. I also want to make better use of other avenues of book buying and book reading that I don't currently use to their full potential, I don't think. I think I very much rely on purchasing books, like physical books. I want to spend more time reading books on my Kindle. I want to listen to more audiobooks, especially given that I have access to several free audiobooks every month from Libro FM. And I also want to use my library a whole lot more. So in order to like allow me to focus more on these things, I've come up with some parameters for myself. I don't want to call them rules, because even though I do want to stick to them for the most part, I also don't want to beat myself up if for some reason I don't, you know? And most of this revolves around reducing how many new books I purchase. This is really just about the fact that I have so many amazing books on my shelf that I want to read, and I can't keep up with the with the pace at which I purchase them, basically. So I've basically given myself exceptions for when I am allowed to buy books. And there are quite a lot of exceptions, but I just think that this feels quite balanced, at least for me, and I think it's going to work for me. So the first one is that I am allowed to buy books for book clubs. I'm involved in a few book clubs, like a couple socially, just between friends. I run a book club over on my Patreon, so obviously I want to be able to participate in those fully. So if there's a book that I don't already have, I can buy a book for a book club. The second one is for work. Obviously, I work in a bookshop. I work in a children's bookshop. It's really important for me to read a lot of children's books, especially as I'm still quite new to it and I'm definitely learning. I can buy the books I already have on order. I have books on order with a few bookshops, including the bookshop that I used to work at. So I'm going to buy those books. Next one is that I can buy new release titles from my absolute always buy auto read authors. I know, for example, that Akwaeke Emeze is coming out with a new book this year. I know that Margaret Atwood is. I have several authors that I want to read all their books. I buy all their books. And if they release a book in 2022, I will buy that book. And then this one might sound like I'm just giving myself all the leeway in the world to some of you, but maybe to others who are big fans of books and book buying, because book reading and book buying are two distinct hobbies. I have both, is that I'm not going to ban myself from buying books at my local indie and secondhand bookshops. One, because I want to support them and continue to support them, especially my local bookshops. And two, because I love exploring bookshops and I love the experience of just wandering around and discovering a new book. And I don't want to deprive myself of that for the sake of being able to say that I did a no-buy year. So the rule that I've given myself is that at indie books and at secondhand bookshops, I can buy one book per visit. And this is a pretty big improvement for me. And I think this also helps me live more in alignment with one of the things that I value about purchasing books, which is supporting my local bookshops and my local indie bookshops at that. And I have gotten into the habit of buying books at more, larger chain bookshops, which I still like that they exist, but I'm not compelled to support them in the same way that I am my indie bookshops. I think this sort of parameter will encourage me to visit my indie bookshops more, to support them more, and to feel better about my purchase. And also to be really specific about, picking only one book instead of 2 or 3 is a pretty big difference. On top of that, I also want to stop buying books online. I mean, I think there will be some exceptions, especially for very particular books. Sometimes manga is just difficult to get. Sometimes particular tarot books are a bit tricky to get, but I really want to focus on purchasing from my local indie bookshops rather than buying online, and just one book at a time rather than 2, 3, 4, however many. That's a lot of explaining because I've sort of gotten quite specific about when and where and how I can buy books in 2022. But for me, this feels good. I feel excited about this. I feel excited about deliberately going to my local indie and finding one book that I'm very excited about. This feels achievable, but also exciting. And I think that's really cool. Okay, now let's talk about my tarot and deck goals. I don't buy as many decks these days as I used to. I think I've already drastically reduced the amount of decks that I buy. I do get fizzy and sometimes make an impulsive purchase, but I don't have that same frenzied feeling that I had maybe 3-4 years ago. So these aren't as detailed and specific, but I still have some goals that I really want to focus on in 2022 around tarot. So my first tarot goal is in relation to a video I actually did recently on my channel, which was talking about the decks that need to earn their place on my shelf in 2022. Basically, my goal is to make some kind of decision about each one of those decks, whether it's spending some dedicated time working with that deck and figuring out whether I actually want to keep it or not, or if it's trading it, or if it's just accepting that this is a deck that I have because I have some kind of other value attached to it beside just working with it. Basically, I just want to have a good sense for myself why those decks are in my collection, and if I don't have that, I want to make a decision about moving them on. Another goal is that I don't want to have more decks than I currently do. I counted my decks and I think including all my Oracle decks and my DBT cards and everything, I think I have, 61 or 62 decks currently in my collection. And I've long said that about 50 feels like an ideal number for me. So I'm not making it a goal that I need to get to 50 by the end of the year, but I just sort of wanted to have that in mind, that currently I have about 60 decks. I don't want to have any more on my shelf. And I don't know, I would like to just get a bit more intentional about some of the decks that I have, and just figuring out what I really want to keep on my shelf, basically. To go along with this, I want to limit myself to purchasing 5 decks. That's 5 Oracle and Tarot decks in 2022. I'm not including trades because kind of like book buying, how that's something that I just really enjoy doing. Tarot trades is another thing that sometimes I just have a lot of fun doing. And on top of that, obviously, in order to trade, you're sending at least one deck off in order to receive one. So I feel like it's a little bit of a different vibe. So yeah, basically 5 or fewer decks I will be purchasing in 2022. I do think that this is a reasonable and achievable goal for me. I think last year I bought maybe around 10, and there were certainly some that I just bought for funsies. You know, I wasn't as intentional about a few, which I'm not mad at myself about, because I still think 10 decks is not some obscene, ridiculous amount for me personally. It just felt like I had a bit of fun for a few months there. But for most of the year, I wasn't really purchasing decks. I feel like 5 tarot or oracle decks gives me enough to be able to feel feel a bit excited about new decks that are coming out, but also to get very specific about which decks I want to be supporting. So it's not just about which decks I like, because I feel like those two things, they're often similar, but they're not always similar. So I think limiting myself to 5, I'm going to really have to think about not only what I like, what I think is pretty, what artwork I'm attracted to, but where I want to be putting my money. And I want those two things, I want to be fitting into that Venn diagram rather than just buying everything that fits into either of those circles. I'm overcomplicating this, but I hope you know what I mean. So I think that will be the lowest number that I've purchased in quite a number of years. But at the same time, maybe because I've already been on a bit of a journey with my collection in the last couple of years, it doesn't feel ridiculous or, I'll blow it in the first month. I feel like that's pretty reasonable. I think it will be a bit challenging sometimes, but I think I can do it. My other tarot goal for 2022 is to finish Tarot for Transformation. It is such a big book. I can't even show you properly. It's huge. It's a big book. I have started this. I started out pretty strong. I haven't done a whole lot in the last little while. But basically, it's a book that takes you through the major arcana and a whole bunch of journaling prompts and exercises for that relate to each card in the major arcana. I really like it so far. And I think it would be cool to finish this in 2022. Which I don't think is I think that's quite a generous amount of time to work through a book like this. So that way I can, get through cards a bit more quickly when I'm really feeling inspired and pumped up for it, but I don't have to force myself through it in a shorter time frame or anything. So in 2022, I would like to finish Tarot for Transformation. Next up are my YouTube and content goals. And to be honest, these are even more vague. Content and being online is something that I love making videos. I love making content, but I have for a long time. I think if you've been here for a few years, you will know that from time to time, I struggle with different elements of it. So even though I do have the inclination to set myself really specific goals with YouTube, I know that what I can and can't do on YouTube, it fluctuates a lot. It really does, whether that's with how much time I have between work and study and whatever else I'm doing, or just how much energy, capacity, spoons I have between everything else that's going on and my experience of disability. It's just a lot of different factors. And then also just sometimes what's going on in the community can be triggering or difficult or whatever. So I have avoided making really specific goals, but then I've also sort of written separately some ideals that I would just like to have in my head. So in an ideal world, I would love to upload 1 video a week to each channel. Instead, the goal that I'm going to aim for, of course, there's still flexibility with this, but this is more I feel like it's mostly achievable. Obviously, not always, but I feel like it's more attainable. And that is that I want to upload 4 videos a month. Regardless of which channel, I just want to make and upload 4 videos a month. My other goals for YouTube this year are and these are a bit fluffy and vague, but they're the things I've written down and the things I want to focus more on. And that is just to make content that I'm proud of, and also to focus on the creativity, the fun, the joy of it all. And then a couple of more generally life goals, and these are definitely more the ideal. These are the things that I would love to do. Don't know if I'll be able to, but I would love to, and I'm going to try to. Those main goals are to complete 2 classes at university this year. I would love for it to be 3 or even more, but I feel like 2, if I can do 2, I'll be really happy. And I suppose this answers one of my questions that I got in my Q&A recently. Am I still at uni? I started again this week. So yes, I am back at uni. And I would love if I could, pass and get through and complete 2 classes this year and get those credits towards my degree. And then the other thing that I'm going back to starting this week is my K-pop dance classes. And so in 2022, I would love to learn from start to finish, complete 2 K-pop dances. I hope it's more, but if I can do 2, I'll be pretty chuffed with myself. And then like every year, I hope to do everything that I can in order to stay as stable and well as I can. I hope to be the best daughter, the best partner, the best friend that I can be. I want to go on lots of walks. I want to have fun. I want to spend time with the people that I love. And I want to write more letters to my grandparents. They're not doing very well and I haven't been able to see them very much, obviously because of the pandemic. And I know that letters mean a lot to them. So that's the other thing I want to make sure that I do plenty of this year. Actually, I did miss one goal. It's a book-related goal. I have had this for the last couple of years where I wanted to read 100 books in 2022. Like that's my GoodReads goal, 100 books. I've already read 42, so I think I'm going to be fine with that one. I mean, obviously a huge amount of those are children's books. Some of them are even picture books, but they're books. I'm counting them. And I've been reading them, a lot of them at work, like in quiet periods in my breaks, just because I have a lot to learn. I don't know children's literature very well, but I'm getting there. And so I'm going to smash that 100 books goal, clearly. So that's quite a nice way to start 2022. I'm already smashing my reading goal. So those are my goals for 2022, all the things that I have in mind that I would like to focus on. They're almost more like 2022 focuses, aren't they? A lot of them. But anyway, I hope you know what I mean. In some ways, I've been inspired by the depth year and some of the depth year content I've watched over the last few years. Obviously, I'm not doing like a strict depth year or a no-buy year or anything like that. I just want to be a lot more intentional about the things that I do decide to bring into my life. And I want them to not only be things that I like, but also things that I want to support, things that I care about, things that I think that matter. And I want to spend a lot more time with the stuff that I already have, both my decks and of course, my many beautiful books. I also don't want to kill the joy of inviting new things into my life and of, seeing what new things get released or discovering new things. Like that is so much part of the joy for me. I don't want to kill that or remove that entirely. I just want to find a way to be more specific and intentional. And I think some of these parameters and these goals and these focuses will help me do that. I want to thank my patrons for their support of me and my channel. It really does mean so much to me. And especially big thank you goes to my high tier patrons, Livia, Lynette Brown, Laurie, and Ian Yitzhak, who choose of their own free will to support me very generously every month just to keep making these videos. But thank you to all of my patrons, past and present, whatever tier you've selected at any time. It really does mean the world to me. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. I would love to hear what your focuses or goals or intentions or however you've framed them, however you want to think of them. If you have a couple that you'd like to share in the comments below, I would love to read them. And until next time, so much love. Bye.